Hello and welcome to my channel. If you've been here before, welcome back. My name is Alfonso Peluso and I'm a studio associate professor in the College of Architecture at IIT, the mecca of modern architecture, the home of the legendary Mies van der Rohe. Today we're going to look at domains in Grasshopper. Now, domains is something that I would say is fairly specific to Grasshopper. If you're modeling in Rhino during everyday circumstances, you will come across domains here and there. But in Grasshopper, domains is a topic that is important for you to understand and get a grasp of. So we're going to be looking today at domains, and we're going to look at 2D and 3D domains, and I have some extras for us to throw in there as well. All right, before we get started with that, if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please go ahead and click on subscribe and then click on the little bell to get the notifications. And if you've already subscribed, thank you very much. If you know of someone that might enjoy the channel, please ask them to subscribe. My goal is to get to 5,000 subscribers, and that should happen fairly soon, I hope. A little less than a couple hundred subscribers away. And again, if you're new to the channel, look at all this great content that's waiting for you. And in 2020, I'm adding more content than I have ever before. Also, connect with me on Instagram at my first name Alfonso _ my last name Peluso. See what I'm up to. Last semester, my students finished up the advanced modeling course, which dives into Grasshopper and 3D printing, and they made these beautiful color 3D prints, and you can see people were excited to see those. All right, let's jump into today's tutorial, domains. Okay, 2D domains. So the first thing we need to construct is we need to construct a curve. So I'm going to double click and I'm going to type in, I've been using Grasshopper now, wow, maybe a little more than 10 years, almost since it came out. So I used it during this whole last decade. So it's awesome to see what the next decade is going to bring with using Grasshopper. So why I'm saying that is when I double click to bring out the construct point capsule, I don't type in construct point, I double click and type in XYZ, because that's the way that I did it 10 years ago before it was called construct point. Maybe it was always called construct point. Don't really remember. But what I want to do at the moment is I want to change my display. I'm going to change it to the draw icons. And then to help us out, or help you guys out, see what this capsule actually is, I downloaded the plugin called bifocals. And if I drop the little capsule bifocals in here, what it's going to do is it's going to put the name of the capsule. So we have the best of both worlds here. We have the draw icon here, and the name of the capsule. So construct point. So I'm just going to make a few of these construct points, and I'm going to add some number sliders, and I'm just creating some points for an interpolated curve to go through. So I want some decimals for this. So I'll start making these. So I just double clicked and typed in 2.55, and that gives me a number slider from 0 to 10. Okay, we need something in the Y direction, so I'll go ahead and copy that. Okay. All right, so I'm just, again, making some points that I'm going to draw some curves through. Okay, so I can copy and paste these a couple times. Gonna align that there. Okay, copy and paste, and I will move these around. So I'm making a curve. Okay, and it's what I'll call a wavy curve, and I'll relate back to that in a little bit. All right, so one more point here. All right, so those are my points that I'm going to construct a curve through. And I'm going to do that by using an interpolate. use an interpolate, not an interpolate with a tangent, but just an interpolate. So that will draw an interpolated curve through those points. When I plug the first one in, the capsule is going to turn red because it needs more than one point to draw a curve. So as I continue to plug these in order using the shift key, it's going to create my curve. Okay, there's my curve. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and turn these off. Okay, so now another shortcut. There's always some bonuses in these videos, so I thank you for watching by giving you some bonuses. So the shortcut Control Q is a shortcut that will turn those capsules off, or turn the preview off for those. And I have my capsule preview set to pink or magenta, so I know it's turned off. Okay, so that's my curve. And in architecture these days, we're seeing a lot of buildings and a lot of geometry that has curvature. So Grasshopper can help us with that. What we can start to do is, instead of looking at the length of a curve, okay, so the length of this curve, bring down a panel here, the length of this curve is some number, 12.780944. Okay, so not easily dividable. But if I think of this curve in its domain, a domain from 0 to 1, then I can start to use math. Okay, if a curve length is 0 to 1, then I know that half of the curve is 0.5, and a quarter of the curve is 0.25, and 3/4 of the curve is 0.75. Okay, so how do I do that? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at a capsule called Evaluate Curve. Okay, and we're going to plug that curve in. Okay, and what I want to set is, I want to set this domain of this curve to be from 0 to 1. Okay, at the moment it's between 0 and 12 point something something something. Again, I want to think of it to be between 0 and 1. Okay, we're going to get there. We're getting there. All right, so let me make a number slider that I set to 0.5, and what I want that to do is, I want that to put a point at the midpoint of that curve, halfway, 0.5. You see, it's not working. At the moment, it's actually just 0.5. If this is about 12 feet, so then this is a half a foot away from the beginning. Okay, so here's it at 0, here's it at 1 foot. Well, I wanted to think of the whole curve to be between 0 and 1. Okay, so to do that, what I need to do is I need to reparameterize this curve. It's a funny word. It's a word I've never come across. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's in calculus. I don't remember my calculus classes. If you do, let me know in the comments below. But at the moment, I'm thinking I'm just hearing this in Grasshopper. So I'm just right-clicking on the input for curve, and I'm going to choose reparameterize. Okay, now it's looking at this curve's domain to actually be between 0 and 1. Okay, because we've reparameterized it. Alright, so now that's a point at 0.5. If I add more, let's say I want another point at 3/4. Okay, there's mine at 3/4. Okay, so if I wanted one every quarter, I would, I'd need a 0. I don't like that these aren't in order, the way that they're being plugged in. I need a 0.25. Okay. Now I would suggest that when you're doing that, you plug those in order. Okay, so, and I would need a 1. Okay, so now you can start to what I call rationalize the geometry. So you can work with complex geometry, like geometry that has curvature, and you can start to rationalize it through something like reparameterizing. And that's the symbol there for reparameterizing. It looks like a Lululemon thing. So when you see that, that's reparameterized. Okay, so again, just going over to the web really quick, if I can get there. Okay, so for instance, I typed in wavy facade just to see what I would come up with, and it reminded me of a building I actually took my students to in Kansas City, which is the Zahner Metal Fabricators. If you see curved buildings with metal on them, chances are Zahner in Kansas City. I think Kansas City, Kansas, or Kansas City, Missouri, somewhere over there in Kansas City. Okay, now you'll see their headquarters, and I don't know who the architect is, but their headquarters has these wavy fins on them. And it's not so important how long those fins are if we can think of them from 0 to 1, and then we can start to make the horizontal facade divisions, let's say. We don't have to know what their distance is apart. Another great building that they have fabricated that I actually saw in person this summer in LA is the Peterson Auto Museum, another awesome building. But again, look at all this curvature. So if we can start to rationalize some of these complex geometries, that's going to help us, and we can do that through Grasshopper. Okay, so that's our 2D domain. Okay, let's jump into a 3D domain. So for a 3D domain, we need a surface. Okay, so why don't I hide this stuff? I get to use Control Q. Okay, and I'm gonna make this in Rhino. Save us a little bit of time. So I'm gonna make a plane. And then I'm going to rebuild this plane. Do some Rhino stuff. Okay, I'm gonna rebuild it. This is left over from the last time I rebuilt the surface. So 6 points in the U, 8 in the V. Let's just see if this will work for what I'm trying to do. Okay, so it's probably more than I need, but I'm going to go ahead and select this, and then I'm going to turn the points on, and I'm going to lift some of these points up in the Z direction just to give this surface some curvature, some 3D. Okay, let's maybe look at this in the top view. I'm going to take these. Oops, I'm going to take those. I made too many points when I rebuilt it, but I will deal with that. Okay, and I'm going to lift those up as well. Okay, so didn't get those. All right, so it's wavy, right? All right, so we have a wavy surface. All right, so let's deal with that. It's a 2D. It's a 3D surface. So we're going to look at 3D domains. All right, so let's bring this surface in. I'm going to bring it in via a surface container. I'm going to right click on that, set one surface. Okay, now that surface exists in Grasshopper. And we're going to use, with our 2D domain, we used evaluate curve. So with our 3D domain, we're going to use evaluate surface. Okay, plug my surface in. Okay, so on our 2D domain for evaluate curve, we had a parameter. Here we have a point because it needs a U and a V coordinate. Okay, so when we're talking about world space in Rhino, 3D space, we look at the Cartesian grid. We look at X, Y, Z. When we're talking about surface space, we look at UV. We're not really looking at W, so UV, so a few letters before X, Y, and Z in the alphabet. So UV is what it needs. Now, how can I quickly give it some UV points? Well, I can use an MD slider, a multi-dimensional slider. And that is set up by default to give me, let's say, something right in the middle of that surface, or where we're trying to go, right in the middle. But just like with the curve, if it's not reparameterized, that's at the very beginning, 0, 0, and then this is 1 foot and 1 foot away from that corner. So again, we need to reparameterize this. So I'm going to right click on my input for surface and choose reparameterize. Alright, so now I have a setup where if I move this, it's at the very beginning at 0, 0, and if it's at 1, 1, it's in the upper right. So we have a two-dimensional domain. I shouldn't say two-dimensional, two-directional domain. And those directions are U and V, so that's surface space. So this could be the U, and this could be the V. So now I love doing this. It's like I'm just riding this surface, riding the wave here. Alright, so that is our some of our 3D domains that we want to talk about. Okay, so in either case, we added more than 1 point, or I should say, in the case of the curve, we added more than 1 point. So we can do that here. I can make multiple MD sliders. Okay, and this one just happens to be in the same spot. Okay, and I can make a third one. I'm just copying and pasting these. And I'm using my shift key to plug in more than one. Okay. Alright, so we can start to host geometry. So maybe if I made a circle and then I just extruded that circle. So I'm just going to plug this in and see if, alright, it's a little big there. Let's see what that radius is. It's 1. Alright. So I'll make that radius a little bit smaller. Okay. And I will extrude that, and I need to extrude that in the Z direction. Okay, and then that needs some height. The default height is 1 right now. Got to cap it. See, it's open. So you see what I can do here. I can use and evaluate surface to host geometry. And this extrusion is in the Z. It's not in the normal direction. That's a whole other topic. And if you stick around this channel long enough, you'll see that, how we can extrude things perpendicular to the surface or along the normal vector. Okay, all right, so what's left? All right, so a couple more things, and while we're on the 3D domain, let's look at how we can use something called a divide domain. Divide domain, a little bit like a rebuild, but not exactly. Okay, so let's bring out our divide domain 2, and at the end of this video, I'm going to put a link to something called a surface morph or a morph box. We have different names, but it's a way to tessellate a surface using divide domain. So divide domain, it has a U and a V count, and by default those are set to 10. We're not actually seeing that on the surface, but if I use another capsule called isotrim and I plug in, you see that's looking for a domain and a surface. So if I plug in the surface and then I plug in the domain, and let me hide the original, hide that one, and I'll also hide this one while I'm there, Control Q. Okay, so now you see that surface has been rebuilt, and that allows us to do a lot of different things. So that's something else. Okay, let's go back over to the two-dimensional domains for a moment and think about that. So we also have what's called a construct. So just introducing you to a few of these, kind of reinforcing the importance of learning domains in Grasshopper. So construct domain. Okay, so let's get a panel down here. All right, so by default, that domain is from 0 to 1. So we can think of this as a minimum maximum. Okay, so I can make the beginning of my domain 5, and I can make the end of my domain 25. Okay, and you're going to see that that's going to change there. So it's a domain from 5 to 25. Okay. All right, now I can also use what's called a bounds. And bounds is where you can find the minimum and maximum. So you could plug in a whole bunch of numbers. You could plug in a list, essentially, and then that will give you the minimum and maximum. So you could, let's look at it a couple ways. So let me copy and paste this. So if I plug these two in, 5 and 25, it's not going to look any different than what I have above. So not that helpful. But if I put a panel out in front, and in that panel I put a bunch of numbers in there. Say I put 5, 15, 20, 30, 40, 60, just some random numbers, 90. Okay. Now there's something I'm going to have to do to that panel to make it work. When I plug it in here, I'm going to get this to be red because this is not set to multi-line data. Okay, so I set that to multi-line data, and bounds figures out the domain. It figures out the minimum and max. So that's another way to think of a domain, minimum and max. 0 to 1 is what we were thinking of it when we were thinking of the curves and surfaces. But again, it can find the minimum and maximum. All right, what else? I don't want to miss anything when it comes to domains. Where are all the domains? The domain capsules. So if I take one of these, like this divide domain 2, and I use Control Alt. Okay, Control Alt is another one of today's bonus features, bonus commands. So if I hold down Control and Alt and I have my cursor over a capsule, you see to the right of the cursor there's an I for information. And when I click on it, it shows me where that capsule is in Grasshopper. So Control I. And then there you see it went to math, and then it went to domain. And look, there's a whole lot more that you can do with the domain. Okay, while I was doing that, I thought of one last thing that I could show, is if I don't want to use the MD slider, say I'm bringing in data from somewhere, maybe it's just data from an Excel spreadsheet, and I'm not going to bring in the Excel spreadsheet, but I'm going to use a panel to mimic that. So I just need two values separated by a comma. So they say 0.2, comma, 0.4, and 0.35, comma, 0.5, and 0.65, comma, 0.8, and we'll say 0.9, comma, 0.3. Okay, just values. And as we learned before, these values need to be on their own lines, so it needs to be multi-line data. So I can plug this in instead, or I plugged it in with actually, so I used the shift key. But that's another way. You see I populated that a little bit more. That's another way to input UV data, just two values separated by commas. All right, did I get it all? Let's see, looks like I got it all. All right, so I'm really enjoying making these videos more often, and I enjoy this community that we're building here on YouTube. So if you found this video helpful, go ahead and click on my head in the upper left to subscribe to the channel. Click on a like down below. Give me a thumbs up. If you have some comments, leave those as well. Right now you're going to see, as you see around the screen, you'll see a bunch of links to other videos that are relative to what we just covered. So thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.